Welcome to the Wild Physio podcast with your host, Andrew Wild. And this week we have Dan Minnicks on, who is a sports performance coach from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He works with a wide variety of athletes from youth to the professional level, as well as adult national figure skaters and competitive endurance athletes. Dan's clients also include a wide range of general population plus law enforcement, SWAT, and members of the United States military, including the Army, Navy, and Naval Special Warfare. He's also an occasional blogger and podcaster, and he's one of the guys that he used to follow me early on when I started my Instagram, and he's always been a big supporter of mine, and I'm really happy to have him on. So thanks for coming on, Dan, and welcome.
Andrew, thanks for having me, man.
It's an absolute pleasure. I wouldn't go that far, mate. It's an honor for me to have you on. So thank you.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Now, obviously, when we were just discussing what we were going to talk about tonight, because it's tonight my time, morning your time, you sent me through a bit of a list of things you wanted to chat about. And I think the first thing that a lot of people in Australia would probably want to know is what the hell's happening over there with gyms, and what are the protocols in place going forward?
Yeah, right now it's I guess depending on where you live in the U.S., it's a bit of a dumpster fire. For gyms in our area, they've opened up. I think that was maybe the first week of June. As far as restrictions, it's wearing a mask, and I'm sure there's lots of different cleaning protocols going on and all that. Restaurants and bars have opened up, and then now they're closed back down after a few weeks. That's only in my immediate area. The rest of the state, some other areas, things are still open. It's getting kind of interesting. What first started as hey, let's flatten the curve and make sure the hospitals aren't getting overrun, is turned into some other things now. But yeah, it's like the Wild West right now.
And in regards to your practice, or where you were practicing, you said that you're not really...
Yeah, so I recently left the gym that I was working at the last 4 or 5 years, and I was there as a client for 9 years total. So not really an idea on what I'm going to do yet as far as going forward. Like we talked about before, it's not really an ideal time to open up your own business right now. At least I don't think it is personally, because just of all the uncertainty going on over here right now. So I've been making it work. We've been training out a lot of people outside. I'm thankful that it's this time of year and it's summer and it's not the middle of winter and have to really make a decision on something. But we can be outside and in a park, and if it rains, there's a pavilion we can use, and people have been seeming to be liking it. At first, I was kind of apprehensive about it. I didn't know if people would be into that, especially when gyms open back up. People want to get back in the gym and get back to their routines. They don't really want to work out of the trunk of a car and all that. But I've been acquiring some stuff. And
what have you got?
Oh, I got some medicine balls, some kettlebells, dumbbells. I recently got a K-box. You familiar with a K-box?
Yeah, cool.
I recently got that. So my only thing that was kind of holding me back was, if the people that want to get back and just, I want to get back to lifting and strength training heavy, and you can't do that out of the back of your car. Well, if you've used a K-box, you know that that's not true. That thing will beat you up pretty good. So I've got a lot of bases covered, and my thought is too, with people coming out of quarantine, even if you're doing home workouts for 3 months, you're still going to be coming back from some level of detraining, right? Unless you have a full gym in your basement, like you have a nice setup. I've seen your stuff. You don't really need a lot of heavy, fancy exercises coming out of it, so you need to start small and work your way back into it. So it's been good. We'll see what happens in another couple months here, but for now, it's been going pretty well.
Yeah, it's definitely a time when we've all got to kind of think on our feet a little bit in terms of business and whatever we're doing with obviously our strength coaching and everything. So it's just a weird time, like I've gone back into the city, into my practice in the last few weeks, and Sydney City is just dead. And, at home here in Neutral Bay, where I'm consulting with clients as well, like it's flying along, but the city is just so weird. And every day I go in there, it's just, I feel like it's because obviously we've had a bit of a second wave here, especially down in Victoria. I feel like a lot of people are more hesitant to be in the city, and it's so weird. But anyway, we've got to just ride with the times and just deal with it and go from there.
Yeah. Like I'm sure you've probably seen too, videos of people in like Times Square, New York City, and it's completely ghost town. And it's so, I mean, I've never been, but I mean, it's notorious for just, mayhem and how busy it is and all the traffic and foot traffic. And there's nothing going on.
Have you never been to New York?
I've never been, no.
Really?
I mean, I've been for like a day, but not Times Square and all that.
Oh, wow. This is an Aussie over here originally from Wagga, and he lives in Sydney now, and he's been to Times Square.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Anyway, now one of the topics we did want to discuss was speed training, and how a lot of coaches don't understand what they need to be doing with speed training.
Yeah.
What do you think are the real key pillars of speed training?
Well, I think, and this I want to preface, I'm not, I don't consider myself like an expert. I've only been in the industry a handful of years. But I pay attention, and I've been fortunate to learn from really smart people and continue to learn from really smart people. And you read what it takes to do true speed training, and you see what people are doing with primarily youth athletes. That's kind of most of what I deal with, youth to, high school level. And I don't know if it's partly the kind of the Wild West that is the American system of, anybody can go out there and train someone, and you don't really have a,
Is there a governing body that?
right. I mean, there is, but it's so easy to get it. And there's so many governing bodies that some you have to have, lots of hours and that kind of thing. And then some are just, you go for a weekend and you're good. And then depending what state you live in, you don't even need to do that. You can just throw a flyer up on the internet, and as long as you look good and you have a six pack, you're legit. And you know about that. You've been posting about that stuff for years as well. But I think it's just to go back to your question, the big things I see are, not enough rest.
Yeah.
Hey, we're going to run 20 sprints and we're going to do 20 seconds rest. Well, that's not speed training. Like, you're telling me you're going all out when you have 20 seconds rest? There's no way.
Yeah.
And just the over volumize is big with even just most workouts, but especially with speed, more is better, that mentality. I don't know if you guys, you probably don't have too much of that over there because you guys got a good governing body, but like here, it's the American way. It's bigger, better, and it's not. I mean, if you read, guys from Altus like Dan Papp, Stu McMillan, they'll say, we'll get out on the track and we're dealing with elite Olympians, they might do 2 sprints and they'll say, you're done for the day.
Yeah.
Well, what do you mean? I got 6 more to do. No, that was the best one you're going to do today. So we're going to end on a good one and not do the next 6 that are shit, versus, a guy, a dad who's volunteering out there with his kids' youth team and running a stopwatch and just running kids into the ground thinking he's making them faster. And it's just not the case.
Yeah, for sure. And any coach can make someone feel gassed and tired at the end of the session, but it takes a true professional and a true coach to effectively get a client or an athlete from A to B to the point where they're running faster, they're more powerful, etc. So yeah, I completely agree. I think that rest periods, and a lot of my athletes, I'll start them off with sprints and that sort of thing down at the park, and they're used to whatever else they've been doing in their training, and I'll tell them how long we've got to rest in between each sprint, and they're like, what? Really?
Yeah, exactly.
So what do I do? What do I do?
Yeah.
Should I go running or something? Or do I have to do some other exercise? No, it's a rest period, mate. So, and how long do you typically get? Say, for instance, you were doing, say, 5 20-meter sprints. For that 20 meters, how long would you rest after each 20-meter effort or sprint?
I'd go 2 to 2.5 minutes.
Yeah.
And that's that's not me just coming up with a number. That's, what I've read, and that's, what the quote unquote, the literature will say. I mean, Charlie Francis, Derek Hansen, Ken Clark. I mean, those guys all say it's in that range. Usually a minute to minute 30 per 10 meters.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you want to go a little shorter, for more of an endurance thing, yeah, but then you're not going to be getting the true speed out of it. Yeah, but I know exactly what you're talking about. I do that with mainly some of the younger kids, if they haven't done any of that true speed work yet. And it's, yeah, we're going to do this. You're going to rest for 3 minutes. Okay. And they stand there and they'll get ready to go after like 45 seconds. I'm like, no,
Yeah.
no. You still have time. And they just stand there, and it's funny because it's like the culture we live in too, right? Like the average attention span is like 8 seconds now. So it's a lot of this. Like, you're not gonna be able to see this on the podcast, but they're just standing looking around, like they don't know what to do. They're getting twitchy, and it's kind of funny in a way. But after a while, and through coaching, you get them to understand that you have to earn that 2 or 3 minutes rest. You should need that 2 or 3 minutes rest because you just ran for your life for 6 seconds or 7 seconds or whatever it was. So you should be needing that rest, but it's breaking those habits of them typically coming from a different system, whether it be team sport or whatever, that they couldn't run at 100% because they knew that they were going to have 20 seconds rest and they're going to be gassed. So they have to kind of dog it a little bit versus, no, I'm going to give you the rest.
Yeah.
You just go all out. And then on top, like you said something before with, you put the sprints first, which is absolutely what you need to do. You see that a lot with people also. Oh, we did sprints at the end to finish. Well, you did like you said, gassing runs. Like, you weren't getting, if you're at the end of your workout, you're not fresh.
Yeah.
So how could you be the fastest you can be? It's just, I think it's common sense that people don't use. Like, if you want to be fast, you got to do things extremely fast.
Yeah, exactly.
When are you going to be most fast? At the beginning of your workout or at the end of your workout? And that's all it is, man. It's just, but people think I don't know if they think, well, if I'm tired at the end of the workout and I'm doing it, it'll be better. So when I'm fresh, like, I don't know. But I think it's just a lot of those things. And then I don't know. I mean, I know you're notorious for the love of the Bosu ball and everything.
Oh, I hate that thing. I hate it.
I know. But like, aside from that, I don't know what you're familiar with, but like over here, the gadgets and gizmo stuff is rampant. Like sand training, and I mean that's kind of all over the world. But like foot ladders and resisted sprint. Like, the resisted sprinting is a valuable tool. I'm not going to knock on that, but the 12-year-old or 13-year-old who's never sprinted before and has a hard time even doing a walking lunge without falling over, they don't need to be hooked up to like a sled and sprinting. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They need to learn how to master their body first. Can you sprint in a straight line? I see that a lot because we use a local high school track that's nearby, and just watching kids like line up and stay in their lane on the track, like they can't do that.
Yeah.
They'll just sprint, and then I don't know if they're just a mental lapse, they're just thinking about other things, and they'll just go into each other's lanes. I'm like, just stay straight. Fastest distance between 2 points, right? So it's, why are you hooking a kid up to a sled or making them do these crazy things when he just got to sprint in a straight line first?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think that with the age of Instagram, I think a lot of people have missed the point with sport, and they think that the gym is the most important thing. When you play sport, most of the time you're sprinting, you're running, you're changing direction. Yeah. And you're going to get better at sport if you play more sport, and you're going to get better at sport if you can sprint faster and change direction quicker.
Yeah.
So yes, the gym's important, but just because Instagram glorifies all these people on there that have great bodies and they're lifting all this heavy weight, that doesn't mean that if you're an athlete you need to be lifting these crazy amounts of weight, and it doesn't mean that you need to have a six-pack, and it doesn't mean you need to look like these influencers. As an athlete, you need to train a little bit differently than a lot of these bodybuilders.
Absolutely.
And with this, and with the sprinting stuff, you hit the nail on the head. The rest periods aren't long enough. Often I'll do a sprinting session with the client that's, anything from 100 to 300 meters total,
Yeah.
and each 10 meters, they might rest anything from 30 seconds to, a minute and a half, 2 minutes. So,
Right.
if I'm pressed for time, they might even do, say, or not even pressed for time at all. I might do, say, 6 40-meter sprints, depending on the sport, whatever it is, with
Right.
4-minute recoveries.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then the client finishes that 40 meters and they're like, well, what the fuck do I do now?
Yeah.
That's your rest
Yeah.
period. Just chill
Yeah.
the fuck out. And
And
I
it's
think we've just created this mass hysteria about not resting because of F45. And I don't care the fact that I'm even saying that on air. F45 and all the hit cults and all of these crazy, workouts that people are doing where they're not resting. And it's like this badge of honor to, oh, look at me. I'm sweaty. I'm tired. I'm gassed. I'm fucked at the end of my session.
yeah.
When that just does not make any sense in terms of athletic development.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually talked to a client about this yesterday. Not an athlete, just Gen Pop, and he was talking about just throwing up at the end of your workout. And I was like, that means I didn't do my job correctly.
Exactly.
And he was like, really? And he's like, why wouldn't you want to do that? I was like, do you want to throw up after every workout? Like that should not be the goal. And then, yeah, I mean, I 100% agree. It's that culture of, you want to look like you're, I don't know if it's like the grind life or whatever, like I'm working so hard that I'm, totally gassed at the end of the workout and I threw up or whatever it is. It's no, that's not how it should be. Like I believe after, if you do a proper, speed session, you shouldn't feel gassed.
No.
You might feel a little fatigue because that's obviously a high CNS intensive thing, but you shouldn't feel like, oh man, like I'm just done for the day. You know what I mean? You should still feel like you can go about your day just like a normal, weight session, strength session, whatever you want to call it. You should leave your workout like feeling better, maybe tired, of course, but not that you have to sit in your car for 10 minutes and come back to earth and, pray that you can make it home safely. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It shouldn't
yeah.
be that way. And speed training is no different.
Agreed. And exercise is a celebration of what you can do. It's not a
Right.
punishment. It's not a punishment for something that you've done or not done recently. You're like, if you haven't exercised for a while and you go out and exercise, you shouldn't be punishing yourself, or just because you had a few extra beers the other night doesn't mean you need to punish yourself. It's
Right.
just ridiculous. And I think the other thing is that people have lost, things have been lost in translation on Instagram and social media, is people think to get faster that weights is really important. Like, yeah, it's kind of important, but at the same
Sure.
time, like if you look at contact times, a true plyometric is under 0.25 of a second in
Yeah.
terms of contact time. So for the listeners, what I mean by contact time, if you land off a box or if you land off of like a step or something like that, and you hit the ground and jump, the contact time is the time you spend on the ground from
Yeah.
when it first hits to obviously when you come up. So a true plyo is under 0.25 of a second. But when you
Which is really
sprint,
fast, by the way.
which is really fast.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, I don't know if people can hear, but it's like, I mean, it's faster than that.
Yeah,
You know what I
it's
mean?
super fast.
Yeah.
And minimizing that contact time is really important for someone to obviously get more explosive. But then
Right.
you look at sprinting, and sprinting, I've already said it's 0.25 with a true plyometric. With sprinting, roughly it's going to be 0.14 when you're sprinting, and the elite sprinters are looking at about 0.1 to 0.09. So automatically you can see there, if you're sprinting regularly, you're effectively doing plyometrics.
Right. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I think, yeah, it's 100%. And if you can get into I forget what it is. I think it's like 5 to 7 times body weight every time you strike the ground on a sprint. Like I think 7 is more, obviously more towards elite, but like average 5 times your body weight and like ground reaction forces and all that on a single leg,
Yeah.
but it's happening so fast that it's hardly noticeable. But so, yeah, I agree. Like if you have a 13-year-old who's very weak, yeah, getting them stronger is probably going to make them faster. But what do you do when it's a more developed athlete and they keep getting stronger and they're putting more weight on the bar, but their times aren't getting any better, you know? So what do you do then? So it to an extent, yeah, strength training can help you, but I mean, it's been shown through the research that sprinting will drive the weights up, you
Yeah.
know? So yeah, it's not as easy as well, I'm just going to keep getting strong. I'm going to put more weights on my squats and then I'm going to get faster. Maybe initially, yeah, of course, but after a while, what are you going to do, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think
If you've got a heap of weight on a squat and you're just moving it really slow, like the
yeah,
eccentric and concentric portion of it is super slow and you're
yeah,
like 3 seconds on the way down or something like that with, you're
yeah,
trying to explode on the way up. It still might be 2 seconds on the way up. That ain't
right.
fast.
No, no,
It's not fast at all.
I forget who it was not too long ago on, you know, as we're bashing social media, someone said it on social media, but there are good people on there.
Oh yeah, for
Um,
sure.
he said someone he did like a Q&A and someone asked him, is like a 1 RM, trap bar deadlift, I think, would that translate well to making me faster? And he was like, think about this. A lift that you're going to move, like you said, 2 to 3 seconds or more to lift. Do you think that's making you fast? He's
Yeah.
like, do fast things fast, and
Yeah.
it obviously, like, do you need some like absolute strength like that? Sure. But that shouldn't be the basis of your whole entire program if you're trying to get faster, you know? And I forget who had said it, but it was like, if lifting the most weight made the fastest people, then all these all the big power lifters that squat 1,000 pounds, they'd be running a 4.4 in the 40-yard dash. You know what I mean? But they
Exactly.
don't.
Yeah.
Different. And then going to that, like getting away from the other thing I think I see is the over, and this is kind of something I've personally been going back and forth with probably the last year, is the kind of the over coaching of speed stuff, from a technique standpoint, and really trying to make the shapes and people look like an elite sprinter would look like, versus just letting someone do their thing naturally. Because I was very much before, for years, there's certain techniques you need to do, and obviously if someone's going to be risk of getting injured, you need to fix that. That's I mean, it should be 101. But if someone, if they don't, they kind of cross their arms a little too much at the midline, but they're also really fast, you know do you correct that? If you correct their technique and they lose a few tenths off their time, I mean, did you just, yeah, their sprinting technique looks better in slow motion and you can draw the diagrams and all that, but they got slower. So do you just let them be them, or it's kind of something I've mulled over the last probably year or so, um, after talking to some people about it, that really like kind of opened my eyes and made me think a little differently about it. Just find that fine line of, are they at risk of injuring themselves? No. Well, then do we really need to tweak their technique? Because then they're thinking about it, they're not doing what they do naturally. If you're thinking about sprinting while you're sprinting, you're probably not going as hard as you could be.
Yeah. It's a good point. I think it can definitely get overcoached, and I see it a lot. And I think that it's much like a golf swing. A golf swing, there's so many
Yeah,
different ways to swing a golf club.
it's a
But
great example. Yeah.
the number one thing is, at impact, the great golfers have the club faces square, and the club faces square comparatively to the path.
Right.
Much the same with sprinting. Once you look at a sprinter in slow motion, contact position and also toe off position across the board will look very similar.
Right.
And these are really important parts. And that's much like the club face in that analogy in regards to the golf. You
Yeah.
still need certain shapes, like you were mentioning before, for a sprinter to be optimizing their performance. But if someone has gotten really fast doing it a certain way, they've just done it that way, haven't they? They've worked it out, and they've just run fast for a long period of time. Like I remember listening to, I forget who it was. The World Speed Summit was probably, I think it was 2017. And I was listening to one of the lectures there, and I forget the name of the guy that did it, but he was talking about the Jamaicans and why they're so good. Obviously, there's a physiological factor there, great genetics.
I was gonna say, if you don't think genetics play a factor, you're sorely mistaken.
Exactly. Yeah, they're huge, and he was mentioning that most of the 100-meter athletes that have won in the Olympics in the last sort of 30 years their ancestors have come from sort of that West African pocket. So in terms of genetics, obviously they matter. They do. But the thing is, with Jamaicans, they have amazing weather all year round, and it's also part of the culture, and they get told to run and sprint and sprint and sprint, and they sprint all year round, and they sprint all the time, and they sprint fast, and they obviously have great coaches as well. But it was really interesting listening to that, because I was like, that makes so much sense. These kids are sprinting from a young age, and they're just running really fucking fast all the time.
Yeah, imagine that, right?
Yeah. Mind blown.
You ever read the Sports Gene by David Epstein?
I haven't read all of it, but I've skimmed it. Yeah.
There's a part in there. I can't remember exactly the whole thing. It's been a few years since I read it, but he talks about that and like how the Jamaicans and why they've been so successful, and how I think is it Kenya, whatever, the one where the guys always win the marathons and all that.
Yeah, Kenya and Ethiopia.
He was talking about similar thing. It's like their population in that specific area for hundreds of years, and how it just snowballed, and now the genetic thing. It's pretty fascinating. Just because people think it's, well, I mean, I can't speak for you, but I know for me, I could have the best speed program ever created, the Holy Grail, and I'm still only going to be as fast as my genetics let me be. Now I can maximize myself, but I'm still, doesn't mean I'm going to be playing on TV and being in the Olympics going up against and being a threat to Usain Bolt's world records. You know what I mean? Just because I have the best program of all time, I'm still going to be as fast as I can be. And I don't think a lot of people realize that either. It's got to be, my kid's got to do this, he's got to do that. And it's just, listen, we can maximize your kid as best we can, but at the end of the day, dad is still 5'7" and mom's 5'6". They're not going to, the chances are they're not going to be 6'4" and being a beast. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. If you just got to choose better parents, you're not.
They always say.
Yeah, exactly. And genetics matter, and they matter a lot. And that's a really good example. The whole African, West African, obviously really good at sprinting. And then you got the East Africans, which are obviously the Kenyans and Ethiopians, and they're amazing at long distance. So genetics,
they're built different,
They're built completely different.
Yep.
They're
like Michael Phelps. Michael Phelps was, they say if he would have played any other sport, he would have been average at best.
Yeah.
He was built to be a swimmer, and everything, all the stars aligned. You know what I mean?
Yeah. The sport,
genetically right for the right sport, and he crushed it.
Yeah. Sport chooses you. He was 193 centimeters, I think, or is which is 6'4", and I think he's got a wingspan of 201 centimeters, which is obviously greater than his height. And then I'm pretty sure from memory, size 13 or 14 foot. And he's got a super long torso compared to legs. He's kind of just this human fish. So, no, I completely agree. Genetics are huge. And I think, and the same thing applies in terms of body composition as well.
Oh yeah.
Genetics matter a lot. I can give a program to someone that's genetically gifted, a generic program that's just, you get it off bodybuilding.com. Just give that to some random person that's got amazing genetics compared to someone that's going to struggle for the next 2 years trying to get anywhere near that. Yep. And that person that's genetically gifted will touch the weight, not really worry too much about their nutrition, and then they'll just look jacked. Genetics matter a fucking lot.
Yeah. And I mean, and going back to that with athletic training, you see that with some of the outliers that have happened in the the past few decades, like, the Bo Jacksons and the Herschel Walkers, and like, well, Herschel Walker only did push-ups and sit-ups every day. I'm like, well, that's because he was a freak of nature. You need to do more than that. You know what I mean? You can't just
Exactly.
get by on that, or
Like Bo Jackson
like
played
those
two
Mike
sports
Tyson or something.
professionally.
Like, was that?
Bo Jackson played two sports professionally, and supposedly I remember seeing the 30 for 30 on him, and he didn't really lift weights at all, did he?
Yeah, that 30 for 30 is phenomenal. That's one of my
Yeah,
favorite ones.
agreed.
Like, he was so explosive that he popped his hip out like that.
Yeah,
Like, the guy was trying to tackle him. And you have like James Andrews, who's like the orthopedic guy in America for sure, and probably one of the best in the world. He's saying that. It's not just someone with an ego saying that. Like, he was like, listen, I've done all these surgeries. The only way that happened is because he was so explosive and his hips just snapped through after trying to be tackled like that. Yeah, Bo Jackson's another great example. It's just, never lifted weights. Look how great he looks. Okay, you really want to compare yourself to someone like that,
yeah,
who was a force in two different sports, not like, well, because you see that a lot with, like a quarterback like Tom Brady is a good example. He was drafted to play baseball. Like, all these other big time quarterbacks from NFL have been drafted in other sports, and it's like, yeah, they could have done it, but they picked the one that was best suited for them. It's because they were a good all around athlete. But yeah, I think that's the other one that people fall into. Well, I see, and that goes back to the social media thing, which doesn't help. It's, I see LeBron James doing this, and yeah, I'm not going to say that's good or right or wrong, but for him, he can get away with that because guess what? He's LeBron James.
exactly. He's a freak.
He can do anything. He could do body weight squats and just do like bro out and just do arm curls all summer. Guess what? He's still going to be the best player in the league next year.
Yeah. Yeah.
But parents see that and it's like, well, I got to just have little Johnny do arm curls and he'll be fine. Like, yeah, Johnny needs more.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I even had a spike of people asking me about after they watched The Last Dance. Have you seen The Last Dance with Michael Jordan? Yeah.
I'm a huge Jordan guy. It's killing me to talk about LeBron, to be honest.
Yeah. And a lot of people are asking me about the fact that he didn't lift weights early on in his career. And I was just like, there's Exhibit A. He was just genetically gifted. He worked his ass off playing more basketball and just kept playing more and more basketball and just got better and better to the point where he was the best in the world. And then he started lifting weights. And a lot of people don't realize the fact that once he started lifting weights and he got bigger up top, he actually developed jumper's knee. So patella tendinopathy to the point where he had to wear like a guard on his knee all the time. I was reading this article about it the other day. I didn't really follow basketball back in, the 90s when I was younger, but it makes sense that he got to the point where his knee wasn't really coping with all the jumping because he was just heavier. So it's like this trade-off. You don't want to just add size for no reason. There needs to be a reason for the size, and it depends on the sport. Because like, really, did Jordan need to be much bigger than he already was? Maybe a little bit, stronger. But like, if you compare Jordan to like, obviously there's that, contact element. But if you compare him to someone like a Reggie Miller was tiny, wasn't he?
Yeah. He turns sideways, you lose sight of him.
Yeah, seriously, he was so skinny.
Yeah. But it then, like, further going into that, it didn't help that, like, the year he started lifting weights, they won the next 3 championships, So now the thing is, well, he started working with this trainer, and the trainer's the guru. He got him on a strength program, and look what happened. As soon as he started lifting weights, they started winning, and he got that final little piece of the puzzle. And or was it just a coincidence?
Yeah.
Like, again, was there a top-notch, great strength program going to him, or was he just doing basics? You see the videos, he's, military press, he's doing squats and lunges, like, giving him just a little bit of what he needs and to a genetic freak, and look what happens. He doesn't need a special, perfect little program, So what would you give to a 14-year-old? You don't think he needs the same things, or does he need the super secret program at 14 because he's going pro in 4 years? You know what I mean?
But
According to the parents, anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And supposedly his vertical leap was actually better before that stint anyway. Early on in his
Yeah,
career, it was better than it was after he did the weights, which again
yeah,
makes sense because if you're lifting heavier weights and it's slow and wasn't that sort of plyometric focus,
yeah.
and he also got heavier, well, that makes sense that his vertical leap reduced.
Right. Yeah, he had a vertical. I forget what the number was. It was like he had like a high 30-inch or low 40-inch vertical in high school when he was like 5'9", before he had his big like infamous growth spurt where he grew like 6 inches in a summer.
Yeah,
He was dunking at 5'9", 5'10".
it's like
You know,
Spud
he
Webb.
he already was explosive. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And he just became 6'6", and then talk about like how he flew and everything. It's like, yeah, because he was so athletic and so relaxed that when you're that big and you jump that high, you're going to be in the air. It seems like forever,
yeah,
versus most guys whose vertical in the NBA is like 25 inches, but they're 6'9", so it's just a quick little dunk. But someone like him who jumped athletically, I mean, and you've seen the still shots and all that where he's changing direction and he's making a cut and like his whole center of mass is like down by his knee.
yeah,
I mean, like he's 6'6" doing that.
yeah.
I can't do that. You know what I mean? Like it's just the level of insane that his genetics had and his abilities was crazy.
Oh yeah, for sure. It was a genetic freak. Now, going back to what you were saying before, how parents often see these superstars doing certain things, and then they want their little Johnny to obviously jump in and do these crazy workouts. We discussed before we went on the podcast that you wanted to talk about the fact that there's too much specificity with youth sports and youth athletes. Why is that? And why do you think we need to focus more on the general? Because I'm with you there, mate, 100%.
Yeah, I mean we kind of touched on it a little bit. It's the whole GPP versus SPP type of thing. You know,
Just explain to the listeners what those acronyms stand for.
oh yeah, so like general GPP, general physical preparedness, and SPP is special physical or sport preparation.
Specific, yeah.
Yeah, specific. It's too much. At least I see it. I don't know. I'm curious to get your take on it, with how you guys are over there, because I know I've not famously, but like I always champion the usually the most of the Russian and obviously Australian systems, because you guys have it figured out. It's exactly how it should be. If you're working with pro sports, you're making the most money. And to be working with pro sport, you've had to go through a lot of education to get there. It's not just a hey, my buddy Andrew, good trainer, I'm going to bring him along. It's like, no, is Andrew qualified? You know, but yeah, I think a lot over here. It's you get to that. It's the rush to whether it's a scholarship or whatever it might be. There's that rush of I need to get my kid on the best program as quick as possible, and I always compare it to math. Like you want your kid to learn calculus before he can even do 1 plus 1. You know, and there's with anything you do that's sustainable, there has to be a progression. If you want to build a house, you got to put the foundation in right first.
Yeah.
If you put a shitty foundation in, the house is going to crumble eventually, right? And you don't know anything about calculus until you know what 1 plus 1 is. So why should a kid who can't do 1 plus 1 be thrown into programs where he's trying to figure out calculus? You know what I mean? So it's just building that. And as you know, with developing, you can ride out the basics for a long time. All the special exercises, special strength, and sports specific stuff that should come later on, like late teens, early 20s, if you're still playing the sport, which is my goal, by the way. I tell parents right out of the gate, or the kid, my goal, I want you to get a scholarship. I want you to go as far as you can with the sport, if that's what you want to do. If you just want to play through high school and that's the end of it, fine. While you're playing in high school, we're going to try and make you the best you can be. But my goal is to make sure that you're in your early 20s, still playing and still loving it every minute of it, not getting burnt out on it because you're playing year round and you're every weekend you're going to a tournament and playing 5 games in 2 days, and you just get burnt out on it. But there's got to be a level of development and athletic development and, developing those skills that you're not getting by playing your sport year round. Do you need to still play your sport and be awesome at it? Absolutely. I mean, I don't think anyone in their right mind would disagree with you that you can be, the genetic freak like Michael Jordan, like going back to that. He can do anything, but he still had to put the ball in the hoop, and that's not easy. That's not just something you just, throw it up there and hope it goes in. You got to be able to do that. So you got to put those reps in. You got to practice your jump shot. You got to practice your free throws and whatever your sport, insert sport here. But there's also got to be some form of development. You got to be able to do basic things first, or at least, if you're not going to take a break from your sport, you got to supplement it with some kind of development outside of your sport. And
100%.
That's something I try and do because I've honestly given up trying to get kids or parents to, get off of the playing sport year round thing. They're going to do it because it's either I'm doing a terrible job of trying to explain it to them, or they're just going to do what they want to do. But I also know too, it's like, at least where I'm at, and I've had parents tell me this, that, we don't want to do this tournament, or we don't want to go to these optional practices, because if we don't go, the kid gets penalized. Even though it's optional, it's an optional practice, but everyone else shows up and it's noticeable that the kid doesn't go. He's going to get docked some playing time, and it's like, that's not fair. Ultimately, the kid always loses. Whether you burn him out, or he gets injured, or he gets, anything, the kid's always going to be the one that gets affected by it. Ideally it should be, you play one season a year. The rest of the calendar year, you're developing. Right?
Yeah, and are you saying that they're playing that season and then they're playing other sports and developing in the gym and that sort of thing, and developing for that other sport?
Well, it's sometimes it's that, but if it's, so take like baseball. Baseball is a big one. They'll play, or soccer. Because you can play indoor through the wintertime, they'll play it year round. And then there's a high school team and a travel team, and you're playing those both at the same time. So, hey, we have a travel team game this morning, and then tonight we have a high school team practice. But I wanted to come and see you too, Dan. I'm like, well, let the kid just go home and chill out for a couple hours.
Yeah.
Now, from like a business standpoint, is that, I have a hard time turning business away, but at the same time, my number one goal is do no harm. And if the kid just had 4 games in 2 days and he's got to practice tonight, and if the parents aren't going to say, hey, listen, we're just going to sit him out of this practice so he can rest, then I'm going to have to be the parent and say, listen, I'm not training your kid today. Have him just sit at home and take a nap, because the kid's still got to be a kid, and you're going to burn him out.
Yeah, 100%. There's got to be a balancing act there for sure.
Yeah.
You've got to be doing enough to obviously see the changes that you want and to allow them to maximize their ability, but you can't burn them out. And that age group of, say, 14, especially sort of 14 to 18, that's pretty crucial years. And a lot of people do get burnt out.
Yeah. And you can see it on their face too. Like, they'll come in and you can just, when someone wants to train and is ready to train, and ones that are just kind of like, they're going to go through the motions. They're mentally checked out.
Yeah.
So you're telling me your training session is going to be good today, so then I can try and be like the quote unquote like cheerleader and try and pump them up a little bit and try and motivate them a little bit. But at the end of the day, they're checked out, they still have, and then, throw on top of that the school responsibilities. You still got homework, you still got all those kind of things. So it's, what's the harm in a kid playing on one team and having a couple practices a week and a couple games, and then just doing that? Why does that have to be? But I think it goes back to what we said at the start. It's more's got to be better. I mean, I think that's the mentality, that if he's playing on one team and he's playing on 2 teams, he's got to be better. He's getting more touches and that kind of thing. But then I even argue with that is, from a games versus a practice standpoint, if you're in a game, like we'll use soccer, if you take the ball out to the field and how many touches do you get on a ball? How many shots do you take? How many passes do you take in a practice versus what you take in a game? I mean, if you're a defender, you know, you might not touch the ball for 10 minutes in a game.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point.
And you might do a lot of just walking, standing around too. If you're kind of dominating the play and it's down the other end, obviously midfield's going to get a little more touches. But like, or a goalie, a keeper, like, I mean, how many quality shots are you going to see in a game versus what you could see in a practice? So if your kid's a goalie, I mean, and they're playing all these games and you want them to get better, I'd rather you try and find time for more practices, even if that's just going out into the backyard and, kicking balls at your kid. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's a real balancing act. Quality is so important, but there still needs to be the quantity as well. The whole 10,000 hours rule, I know that's a sort of an arbitrary number, but you still need to do the time in the sport on the field and also on the training track as well to get to that point where you're skilled enough to become a professional at whatever sport it is. So quality matters, but quantity also does.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree with that. That's one of my pet peeves is like it's quality over quantity all the time. I'd rather you have one or two good practices a week where you take a lot of shots or whatever it is versus you go into 4 practices a week and you're not doing anything, or 4 games rather. And you still need to be able to put those skills into place and play games. And I get all that, but like you hit the nail on the head. It's got to be a balance. And I think the balance has been too much of that SPP versus the general stuff and just, can they sprint? Can they do things the right way? Or are you just throwing, a pile of crap into, a very intense competitive atmosphere and they're not ever going to learn it. And I'm sure you've seen it, a kid maybe that's teenager or a little bit later who's played one sport or something their whole life, they can't do certain things because they've just been so wired and developed into doing, one thing. And I think the other, who was it? Actually, it was David Epstein. I think that new book he did, what's it called? Range.
Yeah.
Where he talks about like it goes into that like versus the 10,000 hours and all that, like Tiger Woods versus Roger Federer.
Yeah.
One specified in one sport at 3 years old and is arguably the greatest of all time, and a guy who played a bunch of sports growing up and is still arguably the greatest of all time in his sport. So who's better? And it's a really fascinating thought on things. But the generalists usually will win. The Tiger Woods of the world are one in a trillion probably.
Yeah, for sure. And sports specialization, if you look at the literature, it's not the way to go for a kid. You need it. You want to try and get your kids to play as many different sports or multiple sports up until a decent age. We're looking at 16, 17, 18 before they're starting to look at specializing in one sport. So if you look at the research, specialization doesn't make any sense for athletic development going forward. So as you said, the Tiger Woodses of the world, that is unusual because it's also a matter of not necessarily just the athletic development and also how good they get at that sport. It's also about the burnout. If a kid's only played tennis from the age of 6 and that's all they've done, well, the chances of them burning out versus a kid that's played 4 sports such as, Federer up until they were 16, 17, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh, maybe I'm going to give tennis a crack. Right. And then, they've got all these different sports they're good at, and they haven't just thought tennis for 10 years by the time they're 16.
Right. And then, and taking that a step further, like those other sports can translate to the main sport, like your main sport. You know what I mean? Yeah. So could Tiger Woods have even been better if he had played baseball or tennis, where it's little like you're still getting that rotational sport? It's a little different, but could he have been even better, or would it have made his game worse? It's a fun debate to think about, but I tell kids that I have a kid who plays baseball, high school, and I'm like, play something else. He just plays and he's a freak athlete. Like He does everything really well. He's got potential to do other things, but he just wants to play baseball, and that's fine. But I was like, what about tennis, or like it's still working on your hand-eye coordination. It's rotational. It's little things like that, and it's just I
But
didn't get that.
there's even so much crossover between sports as well. Like even just that example you gave there, a baseball pitcher or any baseball player is obviously going to be throwing the ball all the time. If you actually have a look at the mechanics of a tennis serve, it's very much the same.
Right,
It's effectively just like a throw, really, with a racket in
right,
your hand. So the
yeah,
mechanics of it are very similar. So there's going to be crossover. And I even remember growing up, like I played a lot of cricket before I started playing a bit of water polo. And once I got into the pool throwing a water polo ball, I was like, oh, wow, this makes a lot of sense, because I
yeah,
already had that athletic development of knowing how to create speed with my shoulder and creating speed from throwing a cricket ball. So I think the nuts and bolts of it is don't specialize, play a lot of
yeah,
different sports.
yeah,
That'll improve your athletic development, and things don't need to be crazy early on in terms of the strength and conditioning programming. You need to be good at sprinting. You need to be good at jumping, plyometrics, squat, hinge, push, pull,
yep,
lunge, carry. Like really, there isn't much more than you need than that. And I think the reason why I put sprint and plyos in the top there is because they're just so forgotten. Everyone's just lost the plot, I think, and think that it's all about the gym. It's all about the gym. No, start sprinting more. And I always start my young kids off when we do typically, an hour session or something like that. I'll start them off with sprints. If we'll do some concurrent training, we'll sprint for the first 20 minutes or something like that, and we'll finish off with some strength training. It's like you take the most important stuff to start with.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And then going back to what we started with, like the sprint training, if you do it right, it takes up some time.
Yeah, for sure.
So if you only have an hour or a little over an hour with someone, that sprint session could, if you do it enough, that could take 30, 40 minutes
Yeah.
from rest and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, what are you going to have someone work out for 4 hours because you got to do an hour of speed, and then you got to, you get kind of stuck in your ways, and we got to strength train for an hour too. Like, well, do they really need that? They just did, like you said before, they just they sprinted for, they did 5 to 10 sprints or whatever it was, and they looked really good, technique wise and everything. They just absorbed 5 to 7 times their body weight for most of that hour, and they did some jumps and plows. Like they might need some little bit of strength. They don't need to be going through a whole big strength circuit now. They got a good bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Completely agree. And I think a very good strength and conditioning coach will try and find the least amount of stimulus it takes to see a change with that athlete to make them better. I
Yep.
think that's a big thing. Less is often more, and the basics is where you need to start, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think just had a thought with talking about this different sports, like it's just like you said before, it was perfect, is the balance. If you're playing all one sport, try and play other sports. If you're
Yeah,
playing other sports, try and find something where you're going to develop, whether it's weight room stuff or whatever it is, find something where you're going to keep balancing that. I always kind of compare it to like a pie chart. If it's all one color, throw a couple other colors in there. If you already have a
yeah,
couple other colors, try and add a few more, or where you can. Like don't wear yourself thin just for the sake of keep adding different facets to it. But what are you missing? And that's something I just try and do with the kids I work with, because if they're playing a bunch of sports and they're all over the place, okay, what did they not get this week? Okay, well, they had a couple practices, they didn't have any games, so they didn't sprint, because you're not sprinting in a soccer practice. And then even if you're in a game, I mean, what is the average sprint? It's like 3 seconds,
yeah,
a couple times. I mean, you're rarely doing true sprinting in a game in any sport. Um, so give them some speed work and some light strength work. If they have if they have a game the next day, I'm obviously not going to blow them up on the strength stuff so they're sore. But just trying to balance them out. And ideal perfect scenario, like I said, it's you're playing maybe a couple sports and you have enough time in between those sports to where you can have a bit of an off season, quote unquote, and develop and do some different things. And I think just the element of play is
Yeah,
crucial. I've been kind of
100%.
getting into that a lot the last couple of years, and I've set up like little obstacle courses for some of the kids because it's, hey, we're gonna do jumps, or we're gonna do some kind of a bear crawl, or anything like that, and it seems really boring to them because kids don't want to be told what sets and reps and instruction. But if I set up an obstacle course and it's, hey, you're going to crawl under this and you're going to jump over that, and then hop on these things over here, pretend like the floor is lava, and they're into it and they go harder at it, which is good. They're putting more effort in. And then, but like what I always tell the parents, look what they're doing. They're crawling, they're jumping, they're landing. It's like putting the vegetables in the applesauce. It's like you're getting them to do what you want to do without them knowing it. Because if it was, hey, we're gonna do 12 jumps, 12 each leg or whatever, they're gonna be like, okay, this is boring.
Yeah.
But if it's, hey, floor is lava, jump on this mat and then jump on that mat, they're more into it.
100%. Yeah. Making it fun.
Finding something that works for the population that you're working with. And then, but I think, play is just, I mean, we see it. I've seen it with, adult clients will do some things like even just like hanging from a bar, just like a hollow hold,
Yeah.
and maybe throwing a band around their foot and like doing like some band assisted chin ups. Like the adults come off they get down and they're like smiling because it's like, well, I haven't done that in years. And it's like, it's giving them some kind of form of play and something different than just, hey, here's a bar, here's some weights. Now, obviously that's important. And I'm pro strength training, but everyone, no matter what your age, we love to play. We love to explore and do things. And you're going to get way more out of that a lot of times if, traditional strength training isn't your thing, or, if you're a kid that's, doesn't really want to be there. But if it's, hey, we're doing some obstacle course stuff or making it fun and feel like play, they're going to get way more out of that.
Oh, 100%.
Now, as you get older, like, I don't think you can have like a collegiate or professional level like weight room. Like, oh, we're just gonna have fun today. Like, at some level, you got to do stuff that you just maybe don't want to do because it's necessary. But you're also at a different level than a 12-year-old.
Yeah, exactly. And fun is very important, but even keeping people accountable as well with sprints. I love to time sprints because
that's a great tool.
Just timing them makes them work a little bit harder, and it keeps them accountable, and we don't see a drop off in terms of their speed during season, in off season, pre-season, that sort of thing. So just something so simple like using a stopwatch. You don't need gates. If you don't have gates, don't stress. Use a stopwatch and just time their sprints, and time them every week, and time them whenever it is that you're seeing them, because it's going to add that little bit of competitive element and the fun to it as well. So I think that's pretty important. Thanks so much for coming on, Dan. Have you got any final thoughts for the listeners?
No, man, I appreciate you having me on. We got to try and catch up more than we have been, but it's been good to talk with you, man. I'm glad you're doing well, and I love all the stuff you put out, man. You're like you mentioned before. I've been following you for we've been talking for a while, and you're a guy that gets it. I think is what resonated with me. Like I only use social media for networking, and obviously it's to try and market yourself a little bit and that kind of thing, and learn from other people. Chances are if I'm following you, I like what you're doing. I'm not just gonna follow a guy just because whatever. Like I don't follow any of the Insta famous people just because I want to look at their selfies. I want to learn. So man, this podcast, everything, you're killing it. So just keep going. And for the listeners, Andrew's the man. Whatever he says.
Not everything, but most things. Thanks, mate. No, seriously, I applaud you for what you're doing as well, and I love the content you're putting out, and I love the fact that you're willing to learn. Like, there's been a couple of physio posts that I've done and stuff, because obviously, you're not a physio or a physical therapist like they call it over there, and you've asked me about certain things, and we even jumped on a call last year where you just wanted to ask a few questions about it. So I really applaud you for going above and beyond, because a lot of strength coaches wouldn't do what you're doing, and I applaud you for that.
Well, thanks, man. I think that's how it should be, though. And kind of going real. I don't want to drag you too long. I know it's almost bedtime over there, but
Mate, I don't need to go to bed. I just got an early tea time tomorrow. I'm playing golf.
I understand. Um, but I think it's with coaches, especially over here, or maybe it's around the world too, is that they'll read one or two textbooks, and they'll say, okay, what textbooks do I have to read to be a good strength coach or whatever? And they'll read them and then they think that's it.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, you just started, like, and I'm admit, like, I've only been in it a handful of years, but I just try and learn as much. I think you have to have that thirst for knowledge. And even if you don't, and you're not wired that way, I still feel like you owe it to the people you work with to try and continually learn, because as well as anybody, the human body is insanely complex. I mean, we'll never have it all figured out, at least in our lifetimes anyway. And anything you can do to try and make yourself better, but ultimately the people you're working with better, if you don't take advantage of that, I think you're failing them big time. And I think that goes into the do no harm. Now, if someone comes into me with an injury, or maybe they tweaked a muscle or whatever, I can help them with that. I know enough to be a little bit dangerous, but if it's something serious, I'm going to, hey, go talk to Andrew. You know what I mean? You need to know when to refer out, but I think there's obviously a lot of benefit to having at least the knowledge on the basics, or at least can speak the language. So if it's, if you're an athlete that's listening and you're working with me, and I'm not sure about something, I can send you to Andrew, and then Andrew and I can have a conversation and we can speak each other's language,
Yeah.
But ultimately, what's the goal? To make that athlete better. It's not about, oh, I'm smarter, Andrew's smarter, and we're having an ego contest. It's about making the kid better. So I think I urge people to, coaches, if you're coaches that are listening, reach out to people that aren't really in your kind of wheelhouse, your expertise. If you're not sure about physical therapy stuff, seek out a physical therapist and just pick their brain a little bit. And you don't have to have a PhD in it, but stick with the basics. I mean, a lot of people have knee problems or back problems or shoulders. Stick with the big rocks of what you would normally see in your population and just ask about it and see what it is. And even just like not to beat it to death, but like the sprinting stuff. With hamstring stuff. Like,
Yeah.
well, tweak a hammy and you need to do this protocol, that protocol, and it's like, okay, they can sprint fine and no pain. I think they're probably okay. Like, and someone just made a big post about that recently with like Nordics versus sprinting, and it's like sprinting is way more intense.
Yeah.
So
Well,
it's
there's a
like,
high.
I can sprint all day. I love doing it still, and I feel fine, and I put a lot of force into the ground. I think I do, but I can't do a Nordic. You know what I mean? Like, I struggle with it. Does that mean I shouldn't be sprinting? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's just, but anyway, not to get on a tangent there at the end, but
Well,
I think it's about, if you have an interest in something, seek someone out. And I've found, and you probably will agree, that the best coaches or practitioners, the people you want to learn from, they're the ones that are going to be open and sharing and want to be giving with their time and all that. The ones that are like, well, yeah, I'd love to help you. It's, it's going to cost you this, and we can only do this, and I can only talk about that. That's not someone you want to learn from. The people that generally have the best information and the best coaches or practitioners, they're the ones that are going to be more than willing to help you out.
Yeah. Yeah. Completely agree. And for the listeners, Dan, where can they find you on Instagram, website, that sort of thing?
On Instagram's probably the best place. That's just Dan Minnicks. Pretty active on that. Kind of my main.
How do you spell your last name?
M as in Michael, N as in Nicholas, N as in Nicholas, ICKS.
Sweet. It'll be in the show notes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I have a Twitter. I'm not too active on there, but Instagram's probably the best bet.
Sweet. Thanks so much for coming on. It's been a wealth of knowledge, and I think a lot of people will get a fair bit out of this. I really enjoyed this chat about sprinting, and it's something that I don't think people are talking about enough. This podcast is brought to you by Wild Physio Fitness. You can find me at wildphysiofitness.com.au and Wild Physio Fitness on all socials. This podcast is live on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Any final words, Dan?
No, thanks for having me. And just, if you're an athlete or a parent out there that's listening to this, I would just urge you to do your research. Don't take things as they are. Really look at what someone's doing or how they're training some other kid, or don't be afraid to ask questions.
Yeah, for sure. Be curious and ask questions. I think that's great advice. Thanks again, mate. We'll have to do 2.0. That was a heap of fun.
I'd love to do it, man. Let me know anytime.
Sounds great. As usual, guys, stay strong.